who had joined in early, you heard us fumbling around as we try to master the technology, but I think we're all set and we'll move right into the seminar. For those of you who are taking a webinar for the first time, welcome to the world of high-tech learning. Although you can hear me, I cannot hear you, but that does not mean you cannot ask a question as we proceed. In the upper right-hand corner of your screen, you should see a small hand. If you click on that, a box should open for you to type in a question. Or if you prefer, or if you're watching a recording of this presentation, you can always send an email to the office, info@robbertlaw.com. So the presenters today were going to be myself and my associate, Robert Wolfgang, whose wife works for the Indian River School District. And I know we have many school district employees on the seminar today, but unfortunately his wife had school duty and he had to stay home, and he's on dad duty at the moment. So thank you, Rob, for almost participating, and we'll get you the next time. So today, we are going to explore the ways in which you can plan for your health care, most notably for that care near the end of life, thus the name Plan Your Care. But many believe that just because they signed a medical power of attorney or an advance directive, the job is done. But things change. The more vulnerable you are to a life-threatening illness or situation, the more your perspective changes. Thus, you need to care for your plan. So in this webinar, we want to emphasize the fact that you can have a better death. Your choice, dying in the hospital, all connected to tubes, or at home surrounded by your loved ones. As we go through this seminar, there are two major goals to keep in mind. One is personal. How do you want to be treated? What is your plan for yourself? The other major goal is to communicate that plan to others. Keep both of these goals in mind as we progress. So today we are going to discuss planning. Why a plan? What is a plan? When to make the plan? And how to make a plan. So let's start with the why. Why is this important, you ask? My family knows how I feel. Maybe yes, maybe no. But even if they know how you feel, do they all agree? You said something here and there, maybe in conversation, but will the family members remember what you said? The fact is, 80 to 90% of you think planning is important, but only 30% or so of you fully plan for your care or cared for your plan. We know for a fact that half the people over 65 going into a hospital have no plan at all. So before we start, I want to clarify the term healthcare proxy and distinguish some terms that seem to overlap. A healthcare agent is someone you have specifically appointed in a healthcare power of attorney. You are probably familiar with powers of attorney. A healthcare power of attorney is one designed just to make healthcare decisions as opposed to a power of attorney for financial decisions. This is what we call a healthcare proxy. If you have not appointed anyone as your proxy, then the state will create a hierarchy of possible people who may be appointed to make decisions for you. This is called your surrogate. In other words, if you don't decide yourself who's going to make these decisions, the state will decide who will make those decisions for you, usually close family members. Sometimes it's necessary for the court to get involved. Think of family fights, for example. and the court will name a guardian who is then answerable to the court. Advance directives is a generic term for any written healthcare instructions, either to express your wishes for care or to name a proxy. So thus, it includes the healthcare power of attorney. So when you go to the hospital, they most often will ask you if you have an advance directive. If you have a medical power of attorney, you do have an advance directive. That's important for all of my existing clients to know, because we don't always use the term advance directive. We just simply refer to the medical power of attorney. But that medical power of attorney is an advance directive. But an advance directive also includes things like a living will or a set of specific medical treatments you want or don't want. And we're going to discuss those in a little more detail later. In this webinar, for simplicity's sake, I will refer to your healthcare proxy as a person named in your healthcare power of attorney. This is the person you choose to make healthcare decisions for you if you are either unable to make them for yourself or you just don't want to make them yourself. That's important because in the medical power that I prepare, it does not spring into existence when you are unable to make a decision, but simply if you don't care or you're too worn out, you're too tired, then rather than you making a decision, you tell your medical providers, go talk to my children or whomever it is that you have appointed. That's a distinction in the documents I prepare, not frequently found in other healthcare powers of attorney. So what is the proxy to do? It's important to understand what the proxy does. For many people, their idea of planning is to tell their agent, don't keep me alive plugged into a bunch of machines. In other words, pull the plug when the time comes. This is only a part of the proxy's role, and in many cases, the easiest. Just by way of example, my mom had dementia for several years when she contracted pneumonia. The doctors could have given her enough penicillin to cure the pneumonia, but to return to what quality of life? Not providing the penicillin was a sad decision, but not necessarily a difficult one. So the hard part is not that last week or so of life when there is little or no choice of returning to a quality of life. Like I said, dying is a process that starts months, if not years, before the final week. So a client came into my office and said to me, I just came from my doctor's office and he told me I have brain cancer. I can fight this, get chemo, radiation, and all that, but this means more time in the hospital, a lot of discomfort, and in the end, no guarantee of a prolonged life. He said, I can let it go, I can be comfortable at home and spend more time with my family than with doctors. So your proxy has to be at your side when you are making all of those kinds of decisions. So just to take a little quick feel for everybody, how would you respond to those kind of questions? And let me see if I can. So look at, you should see a question on your screen. If you can, answer those questions. Would you want to be treated? Do you want the doctors to do everything they possibly can to keep you alive, no matter what it costs and no matter how you feel? Or is the quality of life more important to you than the quantity of life? So Interesting that a third of you want to continue to be treated no matter what, and 67% would rather emphasize the quality rather than the quantity. But this shows the difference of opinion, and you can never make an assumption that your proxy is going to know which of those two is more important to you. So the question is, when do you do a healthcare power of attorney? So let's look at the brain cancer patient. When should he have made that decision about when he wanted, how he wanted to die? Picture yourself across the desk from your doctor when she issues you a death sentence. In 6 months or so, you will probably die. What goes through your mind, and how capable are you at that point of making the same well thought out decisions that you can make today? Reminds me of the familiar saying, it is always too soon until it's too late. Also, as a parent, we become accustomed to making medical decisions for our children, but send your child off to college and try getting information from the college medical office. After the age of 18, you no longer have the same legal rights about your child, and legally, your older child's medical providers cannot share information with you without your child's permission. Bottom line, everyone over the age of 18 should have some type of medical power of attorney. So when is the best time? If not now, when? So having decided to do a power of attorney, the next question is who? Will the person I appoint make decisions that are in line with my wishes? Will this person make a decision for me even if their own wishes may be different? Will this person have a hard time making a decision, or will this person let emotional issues get in the way? Will this person be comfortable speaking on my behalf? Will this person be comfortable questioning the doctors? Will this person seek clarification when they do not understand? This person has to know when you want to call it quits, and to do that, they have to know how to engage with doctors. And one of the things we always emphasize with our clients is the fact that there are 3 kinds of doctors you're going to run into. The first doctor is God. Here's a blue pill, here's a red pill, take the red pill, that's what's good for you. The second doctor is not going to be much help at all. Here's a blue pill, here's a red pill, which one do you want? And then the third doctor is the one that you want to find. He's the one that's going to say, here's a blue pill, here's a red pill, here's the pros and cons of each, and let's talk about which one might be best for you. Your healthcare proxy has got to be able to engage in that kind of conversation with your doctors. So having decided to make a power of attorney, the what, you've decided on the who, and now you have to decide on the how. So many people have taken some appropriate action and maybe even already have a healthcare power of attorney. But the process does not end there. And unfortunately, too many people think by signing the document, they are one and done. The bigger issue, though, is how to prepare the decision maker to make a decision. Think about the decision you are asking someone to make for you. Do you want to make it easier or more difficult for that person? For many of those reasons, I do not recommend a living will except in unusual circumstances. A living will is an expression of how you want to be treated, and many medical providers take it as a mandate, a commandment. It's a document you sign that says, this is how I want to be treated, and there's a question over who's going to interpret that. Over the years that I've been doing this, if a client's family has had a difficult time dealing with a hospital staff, it is because the medical provider insisted that it was in a better position to interpret the living will rather than the patient's family. I've also had a hospital tell a patient, a client of mine in the hospital, that they automatically put a DNR, a do not resuscitate code, in front of every chart if the patient has a living will. Likewise, with what many people think of when you say advance directive, is a document where you check a box that says in some very general terms how you want to be treated at the end of life. But these are medical decisions that are being made in a vacuum without knowing what the medical circumstances are. And you are assuming that the medical provider who is reading your directives is making the same assumptions that you are. Because it seemed more medical than legal, I stopped doing those advanced directives a long time ago because I never felt comfortable advising people on how to complete them. With the living will and the standardized advanced directive, you are creating the risk of a confrontation that is totally unnecessary. The only time I would use a living will is if family members are not willing to make the hard decisions for you, and you cannot find anybody else to appoint that is willing to make those decisions. So how is your proxy to know what you want? I had one client who insisted her family knew exactly what she wanted, and these were her words. I told them to pull that plug like they were starting a lawnmower. She was emphatic, but not necessarily comprehensive. What are you going to tell your family other than pull the plug like it was a lawnmower string? Like the ancient Greek philosophers have said, the first step is to know yourself. So let's focus on that for a second, and I'm going to do another pop quiz if I can figure out how to do it. And I'm not, see, there we are. What are your concerns about treatment? Are you worried that you're not going to get enough care, that they're going to stop treating you too soon? Or are you worried that the doctors will keep going on and on and on because that's what plenty of doctors do? I'll give you a couple of seconds to fill that in. Wow. I don't know if this is accurate, but 100% of you are worried that you're not going to get enough care. When you read the literature, it seems to say the opposite, that in fact, what happens more often than not is that doctors never know when to stop. In a little bit, I'm going to provide you with some websites that will encourage you to answer many questions like the one we just saw. But in my experience and in the books that I am reading, more often than not, the doctors will want to keep trying because that's what doctors are trained to do. They're trained to keep you alive, and they're not necessarily trained to stop. The other thing that I have read is that doctors have a very difficult time being very explicit with their clients as to what their actual prognosis is, and are afraid to be pessimistic in that event. Just to give you another little story about some of my own clients, one of the things that we're going to talk about is how to tell people how you would like to be treated. That's very important, especially if you're going to have a surgical procedure or something else that might be life-threatening. The doctors will want to know what is an acceptable outcome. I had one client that told the doctors, if at the end of the day I can still watch television and eat chocolate ice cream, please keep me alive. The next client said to the doctors, if at the end of the day I'm going to be in any kind of pain, please do not keep me alive, let me go. And then the third client said to the doctors, do whatever's necessary to keep me alive until my daughter gets married, and then after that, I'm less concerned. So the starting point in all of this is for you to understand what is most important to you. And that's not easy to do in a vacuum, but there are tools that are available to you. So when you take a long trip, for example, you have the destination in mind, but there is a lot of planning that goes into your trip's preparation. So too with what we are talking about. You know what you want, or at least we hope you know what you want. And the issue is how to convey your wishes to your proxy and other family members. So how do you plan to do that? Some people just sit down and write a letter about what is most important to them. Others want to be more basic and start by asking themselves some questions. For example, as a patient, I would like to know, A, only the basic facts of my condition or treatment, or I want to know all of the gory details. Another question, as I receive care, I would like, A, my proxy and my family to do whatever they think is best, so I'll just leave it up to them. Or B, I want to have a say in every healthcare decision that is made. Those are some of the basic kind of questions that you need to think through and then convey your thoughts on those matters to the person that's going to be speaking for you. So let's go back to the who for a second. Think about who you would like to talk to at first. So some people want to talk to their spouse. If you're young, you may want to talk to your parents. Some people want to talk to children. Others prefer to talk to a spiritual leader. So going back to that who question again, one thing that I have noticed with my clients is a reluctance not to name a spouse. Married couples almost always name each other, but they do so even if a spouse shows some signs of mental incapacity and difficulty in understanding the issues, and even more difficulty in coming to a decision. So once you've gathered your own thoughts, then create a vision of the conversation you would like to have with someone else. And in that vision, think about when would be a good time to talk. Where would you like to have the conversation? Write down the most important things that you want to say. Above all, make sure that you think about and discuss any disagreements or family tensions that you're concerned about. I've run into several clients whose at least one child has religious considerations that they were afraid would interfere with that child making any kind of decision. So there are plenty of tools out there to assist you, not only in this conversation, but also to assist you in the formation of your own beliefs. So let's look at some of those tools. And by the way, I forgot to mention at the outset that if you look on your right-hand side of your screen, there should have been a place called handouts. And with these handouts, you can print copies of all of the slides that we're showing today. So the slide that you see on your screen now, you can download and print, and it's available for you. So if I was starting from scratch, if I haven't done anything along the lines of preparing a healthcare power of attorney or developing instructions for my proxy and for my family, I would start with that first one called Prepare for Your Care. This is an interesting website that I recently found. It includes videos of different folks of various personality types, including a curmudgeon, talking about one aspect of planning or another. It asks questions as you walk through the program, and at the end, it will print a summary of all of your responses. So this program will give you a self-assessment of how you feel about the issues. Another website that does somewhat the same thing is at the very bottom of the list, Speak Easy Howard. This was recently called to my attention. It too will walk you through the process of developing some answers to these questions. The interesting thing about Speak Easy Howard is that it will also keep a digital copy of your answers and will make those answers available to your healthcare providers if you need them. It's also, if you have an existing medical power of attorney, you can also download it, or rather upload it at that website. And again, it's a quick and easy way to have your medical power of attorney available to you if you do have to go into the hospital. Once you've gone through some type of self-assessment, then I would go to the Conversation Starter Kit. That's the second website that's listed, the Conversation Project. They have a Conversation Starter Kit that makes suggestions on how to share what you've discovered about yourself and how to enter into a conversation with other family members. And it's also how to speak with your doctor. The interesting thing about that is that that project was launched primarily for doctors and teaching doctors how to talk to patients about the same things we're talking about today. The Maryland website has some good ideas, but the reason I included it is that it includes a quiz for your appointed proxy to take. So it's very important to confirm that the person you're appointing agrees with your approach for your care. Obviously, there needs to be a match, and that's a test that your proxy can take to see if your thoughts are in alignment. Finally, I want to say something about my own website where you can find my healthcare guidelines. I've included a copy of my guidelines in the handouts for this seminar. What I suggest in my guidelines is, rather than answering questions, I suggest that you write an essay, and I give you some factors to consider that are usually not covered in some of the other websites. So I suggest that you look at things like what percentage, what's the chances of success of an operation that would make it worthwhile for you? Is it 50-50, 20-80? So you need to take that into consideration. You need to take into consideration, even if something is successful, will it give you 2 more months, 6 more months, or a year? How will your life change if you do go through it? So a lot of things in there that would help you. And then I suggest you write an essay just in your own words, again, as guidance for your healthcare proxy to make the decisions. So again, if you have not already done so, I encourage you to download the handouts that I have provided, which, by the way, includes a sample of the healthcare power of attorney that I most frequently use with some of my clients. So having done all of that, what are we going to do when things get worse? When you can see the light at the end of the tunnel, and you believe that the light is the radiance of the pearly gates, you may want to consider an order to emergency personnel not to use life-sustaining treatment. This is especially an issue for the very frail whose ribs would crack if the EMT, the emergency medical technicians, attempted to resuscitate such a person. This order is called a MOLST. And I know in both Delaware and in Maryland, they have their own form for a MOLST. This is a medical order for life-sustaining treatment, and it may or may not include a DNR. It's actually a series of issues to need to be addressed that you must have a conversation with your doctor to get the MOLST, and the doctor needs to sign that order. This distinguishes it from a living will, advance directive, or even the medical power of attorney. None of those carry the weight of a medical order. There have been many situations where someone is very frail, they do not want to be resuscitated, but they do not have a MOLST, just the medical power. And if the emergency technicians are called to the house, and you're standing there saying, I have the power of attorney to make the decisions, the emergency technicians will ignore you. They will only follow a doctor's orders, which is why you need the MOLST. So the essence of the MOLST is most often to direct emergency technicians not to resuscitate or to provide other life-sustaining treatment. Once it is signed, it is a document that should be left with the patient at all times, and most often it's taped in a conspicuous location, such as the refrigerator door. And I would be remiss in this seminar if I did not discuss the coronavirus. People who are older or have chronic medical conditions are more likely to become very sick if they get COVID-19. Some will recover with hospital care, but even with ventilator support, many will die. In fact, I saw an article in the Washington Post yesterday that said that most elderly people on ventilators will eventually pass away. So if you're in a high-risk category, it is worth a thought or two how you would like to you would like to respond if you do contract the virus. People who do not want intensive care may receive comfort care, which may be possible at home or in a nursing home with the care and support of hospice. Why is this different from any other situation, you might ask? Many hospitals are overcrowded and are not allowing visitors. So if you do not want to die alone, or at least without family and friends around you, you may not want to go to the hospital in the first place. Which brings me to another poll question that I think we have time to do. So, what are your preferences about where you want to be? I'd be okay spending my last days in a healthcare facility, or do you want to spend your last days at home? Wow. Again, another 100%. I'm surprised because it's ironic that everybody wanted to get as much care as possible, but at the same time, you want to be spending your last days at home, which indicates to me that in all of this, there are trade-offs. So if you want the doctors to do everything possible, then that's going to dictate that you be in some hospital setting. On the other hand, if you want to be cared for at home, then it's time to let go a little bit earlier. And in this whole process, I think that's the main thing that your proxies need to know is, in your mind, when is enough enough? When is it that you decide that you would rather be at home rather than trying every new medical procedure that might keep you alive? Again, going back to all of the books that I have read on this subject, the irony is that if you get off the merry-go-round, you tend to live longer. There's an awful lot to be said, an awful lot of good things to be said about hospice and palliative care and how it frees up the person to be more relaxed. And for whatever reason, in doing so, they tend to live longer after all. So, something to consider. So, remember this, that this is a process, and your perspective will change with age and your medical conditions. I know that no guide and no single conversation can cover all of the decisions that you and your family may face. What a conversation can do is provide shared understanding of what matters most to you, and knowing this, it can make decisions easier when the time comes. This cannot be achieved by checking off boxes on a form. It takes work on your part and the sharing of thoughts and ideas, both in conversation and in writing. If you want the kind of care you want, if you only want medical treatment that has a realistic chance of benefiting you, if you want a better quality of life for your last few days on earth, then you have to plan for it. So the medical power of attorney or healthcare, too soon. The medical power of attorney or healthcare proxy is only a part of your overall estate plan. Too often, it is just a standardized form. The medical healthcare proxy, that is only a standardized form that is thrown in as part of getting a will or a trust done. It is given the least amount of attention, but probably deserves the most amount of attention. A standardized form says nothing about you, says nothing about your goals for wanting a better death. By the way, in the materials that I have passed out to you, one of the handouts is a reprint from a magazine article on how to have a better death. A lot of the ideas in that article are reflected in many of the comments that I've made here today. By the way, the client that I mentioned with cancer, remember the one I said the doctor told him he had 6 months to live and he had to decide how aggressive to treat it? He opted for the less aggressive treatment. He wanted to spend more time at home, and he did. He spent time at home, and during that time, he had the opportunity to meet individually with each one of his children and with each one of his grandchildren. And I was speaking to his wife after his death. She said she had no other way to describe his death other than to say he had a beautiful death. And that, after all, is the reason that we encourage you to do what we're talking about here today. So at the end of the day, this is your life, and you can seize the opportunity to design the final chapter of that life. I encourage you to use the tools provided in this seminar to assist in that design so that you too can agree with the advice that echoed from the grave of one of my recently deceased clients. And there it is on the screen for you. Life should not be a journey to the grave with the intention of arriving safely in an attractive and well-preserved body, but rather to skid in sideways, chocolate in one hand, latte in the other, bodily thoroughly used up, totally worn out, and screaming, "Woohoo! What a ride!" So may you ride into the sunset in peace. So I don't see any other questions. I want to thank you for participating in today's seminar. As a reminder, if you still have questions, you can email them to info@robbertlaw.com, or if you can go to the website, chesapeakelegalcounsel.com, you can also find videos of other presentations that I have made on other topics relative to estate planning. So, seeing no other questions, take care, stay safe, and happy trails until we can meet again. Talk to you then. Bye-bye.